Siamo. Welcome to the round international table. We are in Ravenna, inside the 49th edition of the Festival Internazionale dei Burattini e di Figure Palmate. Stiamo per iniziare con la conferenza internazionale Figure di donne, proiezione autobiografica e arte della marionetta. Prima di iniziare vogliamo ringraziare il Comune di Ravenna e l'istituzione Biblioteca Classense per averci ospitato in questa splendida sala che è la Sala Muratori. Ringrazio a nome di Cristina Grazioli, Caria D'Astos che con me hanno organizzato questo incontro. Ringraziamo tutte le donne, tutte le relatrici che parteciperanno a questa conferenza e ringraziamo anche voi presenti in sala e anche tutte le persone collegate. We thanks to all the women actresses and artists that accept our invitation to participate in this round table, and also all the people that are with us in this beautiful auditorium and of course online. So before we start, because the conference is with a lot of collaboration, University of Boston, University of Padova and Unima Internazionale, abbiamo moltissime collaborazioni, tra queste Unima Internazionale, ed è collegato con noi Dimitri Giangenot, che è il segretario generale di Unima Internazionale. Quindi io passo la parola a Dimitri Giangenot. Dimitri, it's your time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Roberta. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you also for highlighting these wonderful topics about the importance of the subjectivity and also the work of artists, the gesture of the artist. So, and also the dimension, the woman dimension. We know that Unima International is very active in the support of this puppetry way, because we have a lot of puppeteers, women puppeteers around the world. So I would say, first of all, women puppeteers are puppeteers, and of course they have their specificity if they want to play in the specificity in the difference of what is a man puppetry. I don't know. That's just a question about also the topics that maybe it will be share, or some point will be in the difference of the vision, also of the sensitivity of working. I am sure that it will be very productive, because the creativity, it has no borders, has no age, and has no gender, I would say. But we need to develop the equality and also the respect of the difference. So like that, we will understand better different cultures, but also different point of view of art. And Unima International is will be forever and is supporting all creators and all puppeteers. So that's the goal of an organization, is the promotion of puppetry, whatever sex, gender, religion, beliefs. So that's I am very pleased, and I want to also that this day will be very inspiring for everybody, for Unima, for all the entrepreneurs and contributors. And I let the floor for you, because today that's you are speaking and not the general secretary or the man general secretary. I am thinking that it's very important to highlight the creators and the puppeteers. So thank you for the invitation and have a nice and productive day. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri, for these kindly words. And now we will start. Before, sorry, I say only a welcome all, also from Comune di Ravenna and from la direttrice, the director of this library. She's not with us, but she thanks us for to organize such an international conference. So we will start, and I give the words to Cariat Pastis. No, Cristina, sorry. To Cristina Grazioli, professoressa Cristina Grazioli.
Grazie Roberta. Ho preparato qualche slide, qualche immagine in modo non sistematico. Abbiamo deciso di parlare ognuno la propria lingua, ma ci sarà una breve traduzione. Proprio anche in virtù di questo uditorio multilingue, le immagini, le figure parlano sempre in modo più eloquente delle parole. Giusto qualche parola appunto e qualche considerazione su questo progetto, parole che condivido insieme a Caritas che seguirà. E prima di tutto, insomma, racconto un po' come è nata questa occasione. Ringrazio moltissimo Roberta Colombo della proposta e naturalmente Teatro del Drago e tutto il festival di questa iniziativa. La proposta di Roberta cadeva in un periodo in cui avevo scritto da poco questo intervento per un numero di culture teatrali che in uscita, a cui abbiamo lavorato, coordinato da Silvia May, e a cui abbiamo lavorato negli ultimi 2 anni.
I'm sorry, for international guests on Zoom, you can habilitate English interpretariat. Right now, you should see how to select Italian language and English language, so you can have English translation from Italian. Sorry.
Thank you. Grazie. Maybe I can do it. Maybe I can do it. It's because I'm not sure. Scusatemi, prendo lo spunto da questo non tanto per autocitarmi, ma per fare riferimento al fatto che negli ultimi 10 anni tutti i progetti, le riviste, numeri monografici cercano di prestare attenzione dopo secoli, se non millenni, di dimenticanze al mondo delle donne, delle artiste e non solo. E in quella ricognizione appunto che portava avanti in quello scritto, notavo come il mondo delle figure abbia prestato più attenzione alle donne rispetto ad altri ambiti artistici e soprattutto al teatro tout court. Ne sono esempio tante riviste, tra l'altro voglio citare questo numero che mi ha regalato Felice Amato, Puppetry International, piuttosto precoce, vedete la data 2004, che già dedicava appunto al tema delle donne nelle figure un numero monografico. Ma sono seguiti molti altri progetti, qui faccio riferimento solo ad alcune note riviste, iniziative in tutto il mondo, e mi aveva veramente sorpresa la vastità e soprattutto la capacità di fare rete di questi progetti. Naturalmente in tutto questo un riferimento fondamentale è andato a questo lavoro che non cito, la vedete nella slide, di cui fa parte tra le curatrici appunto Cariad, che considero davvero non definitivo perché sono ambiti sempre in movimento e sempre aperti, ma davvero dal punto di vista anche metodologico, dell'impostazione, della struttura, della vastità soprattutto della molteplicità nell'approccio. Molteplicità per noi è un termine chiave, lo considero davvero un riferimento fondamentale. Da qui solo alcune coordinate di riferimento, molto ampie evidentemente, ma poi entreremo man mano nel corso degli interventi in questioni più mirate, più specifiche, in casi di studio particolari o in casi di artiste appunto singolari. Naturalmente il grande tema, il grande contenitore, noi abbiamo scelto l'autobiografia. Autobiografia significa tenere almeno presente questo tema nell'ambito artistico più in generale, l'autobiografia, l'autoritratto anche nelle altre arti. E ho preso spunto, sono delle suggestioni del tutto asistematiche, ma anche mie passioni che propongo. Anna Hoch è stata una grandissima artista che si è mossa tra arti visive e anche arte della marionetta, e mi è capitato, sono imbattuto in questo collage tra i tanti suoi, che ha questo titolo significativo, Cut with a Kitchen Knife. Tagliato, evidentemente il processo del collage, cioè del montaggio, che ha molto a che vedere con il mondo delle figure, ma mi colpiva kitchen knife, il coltello da cucina, un utensile domestico, qualche cosa di piccolo che però è capace di parlare di grandi cose. Questa relazione di scala, dal micro al macro, dal quotidiano all'universale, è tipico di tanta arte, ma in particolare del mondo delle figure. E naturalmente chiama in causa il grande rapporto tra arte e vita all'interno del contenitore autobiografia. Cito un'artista interessantissima che forse qualcuno di voi conosce, Charlotte Salomon, che ha affidato a un grande progetto apparentemente non teatrale, ma che ha molto a che fare con il teatro, una sorta di autobiografia affidata non a caso all'immagine. Ma a proposito della dimensione domestica, familiare, degli oggetti, delle cose comuni, mi piace citare, oggi pomeriggio ci sarà la presentazione del libro su Maria Signorelli, e questi sono i fantocci, è una delle tante artiste che soprattutto un secolo fa, all'inizio del Novecento, legata ai movimenti delle avanguardie, utilizzava questi materiali tipicamente femminili, e su questo potremmo discutere forse nel corso della mattinata. Quindi ago, filo, bottoni, cuciture, ritagli, scarti, collage di nuovo.
Più lentamente.
Grazie. Scusa. Un altro esempio, artista poco nota, è Jacques, che lavora non a caso tra marionette e opera tessile, di nuovo il filo, la tessitura, qualche cosa che riguarda una attività nella tradizione legata al femminile. E poi le tante donne, qui abbiamo un esempio di Annie Albers che anche si dedica alla tessitura, non alle figure, ma introduciamo un'altra questione, le coppie nella vita e nell'arte. Abbiamo innumerevoli esempi di artiste che solo recentemente sono state studiate, rivalutate, mogli, compagne di grandi artisti che invece sono stati affidati alle pagine delle storie dell'arte o delle arti performative. Annie Albers, Irene Stravinsky, Anna Hoch, scusate, Amy Hennings con Ugo Ball. Gli esempi sarebbero tantissimi. Naturalmente questo tema va declinato poi dentro al motivo, all'universo delle figure, e anche questo potrebbe essere un filone di ricerca molto interessante. L'autoritratto, la tipologia, l'iconografia ricorda un po' la grande tradizione dell'attore con la maschera, dell'attore che giustifica, esibisce la propria professione portando la maschera, ma in questo caso abbiamo numerosi esempi di artisti, marionettisti, burattinai. Devo andare piano, scusate, mi dimentico ogni tanto. Burattinai, marionettisti che trovano il loro doppio autoritratto autobiografico nelle marionette o nei burattini che creano. Molti esempi evocativi, li scorro solamente. E naturalmente anche dentro le arti figurative ricorrere di maschere e marionette come doppi dell'artista o delle artiste. E infine, naturalmente, ma chiudo perché il tempo vola, naturalmente queste linee, queste immense coordinate convergono dentro al nostro tema che mettono insieme l'autoritratto, l'autobiografia e il rapporto tra arte e vita declinato in quel linguaggio straordinario e peculiare delle figure. Chiudo su un'ultima citazione. In questa rivista appunto di 20 anni fa l'editoriale si intitolava Why Women? Perché le donne? La mia domanda è why puppets? Cioè perché la figura? Qual è l'urgenza di tutte queste artiste a passare attraverso il linguaggio della marionetta, della figura, del burattino per esprimere tracce autobiografiche? Su questo do la parola a Cariad che conclude questa introduzione. Grazie.
Thanks very much, Christina, and especially for those really interesting examples you've given us. So I'm just going to say a few words. I would like to say that thank you to Roberta, thank you to everybody who has participated in making this symposium happen in this beautiful building. It's the second Unimar roundtable this week. Unimar, for anyone who doesn't know, is the International Puppetry Association, the Union Internationale de la Marionnette. And on Monday, Unimar, which is the oldest theatre organization in the world, became 95 years old. And our General Secretary, Dimitri Jejunov, organized a wonderful roundtable on the subject of puppetry and peace in Brussels, under the auspices of the puppet festival JEM. And in that roundtable, people talked about what puppeteers do to work towards a culture of peace. And we also talked about what it means to create peace. So this is the second roundtable in this week, and it's a great honor to participate in it. As part of the Unimar Research Commission, which is one of the many commissions in Unimar, its aim is to promote research in puppet theatre, to enable symposia, publications, and activities connected to scholarly research. Our next big event will be next year in Chuncheon at the Congress of Unimar, and it will be a conference on borders in puppet theatre. So we try and approach these really important topics. So autobiography, women and puppetry, or women, puppetry and autobiography, why? Christina mentioned one or two things. I'm going to mention a couple of other things. I've always been very struck by the act of mark making in visual art. When we make art, the first stroke of paint, the first touch of the clay is a mark, a trace, a relationship between the human being and the material. And mark making is an activity which, apart from being the beginning of an artistic work, says, I am here, I exist. And this is very pertinent, obviously, to the theme of autobiography. And I will come on to stories in a moment. I read once that puppetry, along with music, was the most practiced art in prisons. And this is really interesting, because when you are in prison, you are kind of invisible, you are erased, you are cancelled, you are out of public discourse. So many autobiographical stories through history have also been cancelled, erased, hidden, concealed, missed. And this has particularly been the case over the last 2,000 years for women. We know that gender is a controversial and contested topic. And we also know that sometimes gender changes over the course of a lifetime. So when we talk about women, we don't need necessarily to talk about essentialist ideas. But within patriarchy, Women's stories have historically been made less important. They've been erased. We know stories about the possibly mythical Pope Joan, who pretended to be a man in order to become Pope. We know that many female writers changed their names to men's names in order to be published, otherwise they would be ignored. There are so many women, however, that have been deeply involved in the history and the practice of puppet theatre, and autobiography to some extent is about reparation or restoration of what has historically been erased. But it's not only that. Making autobiography is about telling your story. It's not the only thing that's contested. In today's world, we know that the subject of truth is a very contested topic. It's very difficult to know what is the true story, the right story, and your own story. So to put your own story on stage, as well as saying, I exist, is also about saying, this is my story, and perhaps some of you have also experienced a similar story. So women performers in general, in autobiographical works, tell of stories that have been concealed, that have been suppressed by dominant discourse, that others, perhaps, as we have seen in the story presented by Yael yesterday, some people have been unwilling to listen to. So putting autobiography on stage is a way of telling stories that have historically been erased, and it is a way of telling the truth, which may touch other people's lives. We sent out to our wonderful speakers a number of questions. These were questions such as, why do you use autobiography? What your individual and collective themes, what individual and collective themes you are using? How does your autobiographical work intersect with politics, passions, interests, contemporary topics? Is autobiographical puppetry different from other autobiographical art forms? Why has women's theatre used autobiography so much? So Christina mentioned some aspects of puppetry, and I'll just mention a couple more. Puppets can talk about taboo subjects. And by putting puppets on stage, we can also create some difference. But I'd like to end by just saying something desperately important, I think, for women's theatre, for women's puppetry, and for telling stories that matter. Puppets enable us to be intimate. They enable us to be vulnerable and fragile, and they enable us to tell painful stories. And when I left Yael's show yesterday, I was very much struck by the sense that this was about intimacy and relationship. So with that, I'm now going to give the word back to Roberta, who's going to introduce our first wonderful speaker and artist.
Okay, now I introduce Yael Rassouli, that you are very, very honored to see yesterday on the show Edit and Me. Yael Rassouli is a critically lauded visual theatre director, actress, singer, and puppeteer. Born in Jerusalem, she trained as a classical singer and she studied theatre design in London. Her distinct theatrical language, inviting the audience to travel into what is unspoken in our society, is based on a multidisciplinary approach, combining different forms of theatre, puppetry, visual art, and music. Her shows include paper cuts, winner of Excellence Awards at the New York International Fringe Festival, The House by the Lake, a musical cabaret for actresses, dolls, and objects, depicting three sisters in hiding during Mondial War, Second Mondial War. One Voyage, in collaboration with acclaimed author Edgar Queret, Silence Makes Perfect, the second part of a trilogy on violence against women and children, and most recently, Edith and Me. Sorry. One moment. Okay. The third chapter in her trilogy, in collaboration with Norland Visual Theatre. Alongside her prolific theatrical career, Rasooli performs as a singer with numerous ensembles and orchestras in Europe and North America. Her shows have been presented in more than 30 countries and hundreds of festivals and theatre worldwide, gathering numerous international awards. She has been a guest professor for a semester at the Trinity College, Yukon, and the Eugene O'Neill Theatre Center, and given masterclasses around the world, including Vietnam, Oakland, and New York. So, please. Yeah,
hi, everyone. Good morning. I can't tell you how I'm moved to be here. Yesterday was our first international festival performance with Edith and Me. It's a very moving experience. I guess in the time we have here together, I would like to share a little bit of my process. It's really, I feel like it was a voyage in so many different lands and a lot of fear. And I think this is what's really important to me. Like along the way, in making this show, that is the third part of a trilogy that started when I was 22. And along the way, there were many doubts, many moments where I thought like, what am I doing? We are touching a wound. And you always have this question, is this good for me? Is this good for my life? Is this not keeping me still in the state of being a victim and giving so much echo to this traumatic event? Is this really about healing myself and healing others? I'm glad I'm at a stage in my life where if it's not about healing, I don't have time for it. It took a long time getting here. And one of my fears along the process was what I will say after the show. Like in interviews or in conferences, I was already, really thinking how much, because as I think what I want to say to you, I also think what I cannot say to you. And so I am talking and I am censoring myself constantly. But also I will speak from my heart. To be able to tell you really how this creation from traumatic events has changed my life and saved my life. I think from the beginning, in more difficult moments, I thought, I want to be the person, I want to be the woman I will be when I will be able to do this show. So maybe I will show you a little bit visually, since we are in visual medium. Yes, okay. So I want to tell you, first of all, why I chose puppets. I think it's very connected. I was really lucky from early age to realize that it's a medium where I can have my own voice and I can tell my own story, as you said. And that I don't have to audition So, and I don't have to wait for someone to give me the role that I wanted to play. I will write it myself. I will direct it myself. I will find the artists that I want to collaborate with, and hopefully also I will be able to put it in a few suitcases and travel the world. And you know, so I wanted to get away from Jerusalem. I grew up and see other places and meet other cultures, and this was my first show, Paper Cat, that I made in my living room. Maybe some of you saw this. Okay. So it enabled me to be all the characters. I could be man characters, I could be woman, I could I'm skipping quickly because also to show you very, very different aesthetics. For me, each show and each story I tell, I have to invent another visual language and another language of direction and manipulation of puppets. It's not the easy way. But, you know, I believe in it. And this show, The House by the Lake, was inspired by, I guess, my family story also. My mother, when I grew up, she decided that she will hide the Holocaust from me as long as she could. But I discovered, you know, it's my grandfather is a Holocaust survivor from Auschwitz. And I think sometimes the stories that were not told, they, you know, they talk through us. And I think also it's really an example of how we need time and we need distance also to be able to express things. And even with the story of survival and a childhood that is robbed because of war and violence, then I think we need time, and I'm third generation. So I think I was able to touch these subjects also because I had the protection of puppets and dolls and objects and transforming scenery. And so, you know, this is a story of three sisters hiding and in a small room as the war comes closer and closer to them. Of course, I'm speaking to you from, you know, incredible heartbreak. So just to show you, it's always been, I always feel like we have to find a way, the darker it goes, the more light and humor also that we have to find. I've not always succeeded in this, but it's definitely, you know, an imagination. And I haven't found another art form that allows us to touch pain and trauma and grieving and violence in this way. Now, I wanted to show you also a few images from a show that was a collaboration with Edgar Keret, this wonderful short story Israeli author. And I thought, oh, why am I going to show them? This is me, blonde, by the way. I thought, like, why am I showing them this piece? It has nothing to do with it. Well, it has everything to do with it. This show I directed, it was a collaboration with Charleville Puppetry Festival. It premiered in 2017. And it was really shortly after I went through a very violent experience. I started working on it before, but now when I look at these images, then I thought, wow, I was really hiding under all, we were three people and there were like a million characters. It's all me, and you know, it was like I was hiding in someone else's story. Well, it was wonderful adapting these stories, but still, you know, I was, I think I was very scared at this moment in my life. It was very funny, comical show also, crazy. But like, I just look at it, I looked at it this morning and I thought, hiding. So I will skip quickly. But again, like, I mean, this is, oh, sorry, I don't know how to go back. Can I go back? Yes, thank you. This is me. And then when I turn my head, this is, so speaking of gender and what puppetry allows us to be, I also had a voice transforming machine here. So, speaking of breaking boundaries, and I think one of the things that attracted me to puppetry was that they won't be able to define me. The world will not be able to define me. And now I will, maybe, Roberto, you can tell me when I have 5 more minutes. If
Yes,
possible?
of course.
Okay,
Yes,
so now I will speak more directly.
No, you have 6 minutes.
6? What?
No, it's not correct. No, you have much more.
Okay. Just give me a heads
I
up
tell
and
you
then
when
stop
you-
me, and then because I can
Yes.
go on forever, just
No,
stop.
when at least 5 minutes I give.
Okay, so now I'll talk to you more specifically about my trilogy on sexual violence. And so actually what you're seeing now, this is an image from my first performance. I'm like 22 years old here. How lovely. So, when I said a show that can save your life, or art that saved your life, I completely see it in this performance. It was a moment, I was still a student in the School of Visual Theater in Jerusalem. And in my 3rd year, things were going pretty well. And then suddenly I had a huge crisis, and my first experience really with depression. And I didn't know what was happening. And then things came out. And my own story of sexual assault that lasted for a long time emerged, and it was brutal. Waking up into this, I didn't have all the protection I had before, and I actually decided to go to the police. That was my really first reaction. Like, it was like a scream came out. It was like coming out of people that come out of cults, and suddenly they see. And when I saw, then I saw the magnitude of the crime. And like the day before, I was like, what? It was really life changed in the moment, just seeing it. And then I went to the police, and then I went through what a lot of most people who are victim of violence go through with the police, which was re-victimization, and a very traumatic, more trauma, and more injustice. And I remember I came back from a meeting with a lawyer, and he said, "Oh, you were 17 and not 16, so you don't have a case." And after I already took things into, like, after I already fought for my narrative, and I went back to school that day, I had this cello case that I found. There became the 2 parents in the story of this girl that goes on her way to her music lesson. It's I found a way to distance the story and invent other details, and then she actually the cello case, when it was closed, it was The Predator, and this was the first puppet I made. And really, like, this whole show came together very quickly. I came into a room with wanting, like, to scream and like completely broken. I had these elements, this puppet I made, I didn't know why. I had this cello case, and the whole show came together to this Comme c'est charmant show, How Lovely, that was 25 minutes. And I started touring already as a student, and then I started touring internationally with this show. And first of all, I have to say, this show, after I played it, people would come to me, women would come to me, also men would come to me and say, "This is my story, and thank you for telling it." And it was really, I was like, oh, I'm not alone. Like, at that age, long before Me Too, then I was living with a lot of shame still about it. So, this show was kind of stronger than me in a way. and it came out of me, and it empowered me, and it opened also, you know, doors for me. And then after I toured it in many, many countries, I decided I will make the sequel. And it will be not only the story of this young girl, this child, I will make the story of the woman. I will talk about the post-trauma, and I will talk about coming out and reclaiming your voice. Because in the meantime, the years were passing, and I was coming out also. I was healing, I was doing endless kinds of therapy. And luckily also my art is my therapy. So, so I thought I will do the second part, and I started working on it. So Silence Makes Perfect. I decided I will not be on stage. I will be with a classical musician, very, very high level. And then just like in the just before our first residency or presentation of residency, oh, can you go back? Then another very violent experience happened to me. It didn't happen to me, it was actually committed against me. And I had to actually put this whole project, like, that was about sexual assault and surviving, and I had to put it aside. And I actually had to fight in other ways. And then years later, I get a phone call from a wonderful pianist, a top classical pianist, Amit Dolberg, who said, who was my teacher in the music academy, and he said, Yael, let's make a show together. Do you have an idea? I was like, yeah. I wasn't sure if I had the courage and the power to go back into this story. But now the difference was that I had this person with me saying, let's do it. Amit said, I have a 15-year-old daughter. This is the most important thing. And, you know, this is like partners are the most important thing. We cannot do it alone. Hopefully I'll have time to speak more about partners. And then we created this show in 2021, Silence Makes Perfect. So we recreated the first chapter. And then we went into the second chapter of the post-trauma and of the transformation of how violence transformed you. This is a bit how we worked with 3D printer and masks. Daniel Coppola is the designer. And yes, I wanted to talk about what violence does to you and takes from you, and the distance it puts you with the world, and the nightmare, and you know, you have to hold all these broken realities inside you. So how to give an expression for this inner feeling and transformation and feeling loss, and how to share that and put this in the light. You know, we're talking about truth. And I was really, yes, so it was pretty dark. It's pretty dark performance. This is like the ending, the places switch, and the masks come off, and she can just sing and shine, and I stand with this dress, and all the audience lights up. Few images of this. So, I mean, this show, it's touring internationally now, but I have to say, I don't know how to say it, so I will just say it. It's not easy selling shows about sexual assault and rape. And I am very, very touched, and when people do, and when festival directors decide, no, this is important, we want to talk about this. And because a lot of people tell me, oh, it's not for our audience. Who is this wonderful audience that doesn't live in the world that we live in? You know, this is the story of so many, and you know, so, aha. And then we arrived to the third chapter. which started in another name. I mean, you actually saw the third chapter. It was Edith and me. We saw it last night. But first it was called Burning Blue. It had many names. And then I thought, because after my experience again of a major traumatic event, and also deciding to speak up and go to the authorities, and then to go through the hell of that, and to be at the end of the road, like at the end of the legal road, crushed, and having to hold this life, because at the same time I was a touring artist doing this festival, this singing with these wonderful musicians, this, and at the same time, you have to hold all this backstory, and so when once again I was silenced, like the woman before me was silenced, I decided that I will make this show. It was really coming from some place of survival, of how can I keep living in this world. And so first of all, I was given a chance to direct a show with 20 people in Corsica, in Aria International. Oh, okay. Okay, never mind, we'll skip this. But I decided, I directed this show with 20 women in a forest. And again, I was hiding a lot in the process. So I will skip it to this. And then when I said before, the most important thing I think is finding your partners and people that are with you on the road. And I've worked with some fantastic artists, and also with wonderful theaters that believed in me, and my co-producers. And I would just like to mention one of them now, which is Norland Visual Theater, which has been my safe haven, and has been one of the major supporters of this project. It's a little fisherman village in the north of Norway, 1,000 people, I think, and 5 different theaters. And they are residencies. And you really you're in the most, oh, sorry, can you go back? Thank you. It's too soon. And that's where I came with all these wonderful artists. And this was already, 5 years ago. And I made this first version called Burning Blue. I made this show. Only a handful of people saw it because I was scared to play it, and I censored it. I went through a real grieving process, and then I thought I had to really, again, take a distance, take time from it. And then Norway, again, they said, no, we will keep supporting you after all their support. And they said, we'll give you 2 more weeks. Present another idea to us. And I thought, maybe I need to be off or something. But it was always the same story. And, oh, this is from Burning Blue. Yes. Masks made with Natasha Below foundation. This is me, of course. And this is from the show you saw last night. And maybe if I have 1 more minute, 2 more minutes.
Yes, and if you like, if you agree, we can show a little teaser, trailer of Silence Made Perfect at the end of
perfect. You have it.
Yes. Angela, can you try to find the trailer of
It's better.
yes. Now we will find.
Okay. Well, maybe I will just tell you something that happened to me last week. I was coming from shows in New York, and I flew to Tel Aviv for a few days. So the mother of one of my friends was kidnapped to Gaza, 84 years old, put on a motorcycle, and she came back after 49 days. in Gaza, and they thought she was dead, like we're going to die. They told her family to say goodbye, and she was being treated in the hospital, and they didn't think she would make it. And I called my friend and I asked him if I could come to the hospital. She was recovering. She woke up from coma. She was coming back to life. And I asked my friend if I could come and visit her in the hospital. And he said, come. And I was so scared. I've never been so nervous before playing. And I brought Edith with me. And I said, you know, she will speak. She will sing to her. And it was really just a huge privilege also to see how I mean, I feel like I am in the service of something, and I feel the force of this art form, and I want to encourage, you know, the young people sitting here in front of me to make your own show and your own art and find your own way to heal and heal others. And last week, finally, Elma Abraham, my friend's mom, she came out of the hospital. And I told her, when you come out of the hospital, we will do a show for you and all your community. And Edith will sing for you. So this happened last week. And I would just like to say, stop the violence and all the innocent death and killing of victims on both sides. My heart breaks in this situation. And thank you so much, Roberta, for inviting me and for letting me be with you here and encouraging us to keep going with an open heart, and thank you. Oh my God. Sorry about that. Thank you. I will zoom quickly. I forgot the grand finale. Just a few faces from other artists that have been on my path, helping me create this show. So Google them. They are the best. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now let's see a quick teaser trailer by Science Victor.
Listen carefully.
Oh, no, this is not the trailer. Not the trailer.
Here is a lovely little family.
È il bello della diretta. Sì.
Not the trailer.
And her two parents.
Not the trailer.
And what a musical family 'twas indeed. Here is a lovely little family.
È il bello della diretta. Sì.
No. Ah,
No, è quello sotto da 11.
first one. Ok.
Il terzo.
Napo, faccio da qua così.
Napoli fa Angela.
This one.
Yeah.
Ah.
How long before you realize?
Now, Carla, with your hand.
Thank you so much, yeah, for fixing the microphone.
Ruining it.
Just to say that Yael's presentation and as I said earlier in the introduction, vulnerability about these processes are such crucial themes for women, people in general in art. And there will be a chance to ask questions, discuss and share thoughts a bit later. Our next wonderful presenter is joining us online from Canada. It's Magali Chouinard. Magali is going to present in French, and she'll be talking about her work, which also contains autobiographical elements in a very different way. Magali Chouinard is a multidisciplinary artist who has been converging her visual arts practice with puppetry since 2008 in an effort to deepen her poetic research on presence, movement, and interiority through the representation of the body and its multiple essences. She has perfected her unique way of staging the virtual and performative body through a plurality of techniques, led by her desire to render the fragility of presence perceptible. Her research brings together timeless characters and emotional states. The work is based on a visual and poetic dramaturgy that plays with scale, materials, and presence effects through appearance and duplication. By deliberately creating confusion, Magali Chouinard leads spectators to let go of narrative logic. Instead, she invites them to experience the show as one might read a poem, letting themselves be carried by both the contemplative rhythm of metaphorical images and the emotions that these images conjure up within each person's inner self. Over to you, Magali.
Alors oui, voilà, j'ai le son. Vous m'entendez? Bonjour, bonjour tout le monde là-bas en Italie. Premièrement, merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. Je trouve que c'est tellement un beau projet que vous prépariez comme ça une table ronde sur le sujet de la création autobiographique et particulièrement chez les femmes. J'étais touchée d'être invitée. Attendez, je dois répondre à une question. Il semble que vous ayez changé de langue. Veuillez la mettre à jour afin que nous puissions confirmer votre langue. OK, un instant. Alors, ma langue, c'est le français. Ah, bon. Alors, j'imagine que maintenant, il peut y avoir une traduction simultanée. J'ai personne en vis-à-vis de moi, fait que je ne sais pas quand je parle si quelqu'un... Faites-moi signe, en tout cas, si quelque chose ne va pas. J'aimerais partager mon écran tantôt aussi en parlant, pouvoir présenter des photos. Vous me direz si c'est possible de le faire.
We are okay. We can hear you. It's okay.
OK. Bon, parfait. Alors, ben c'est ça, quand j'ai reçu l'invitation pour parler de mon travail dans le cadre de la table ronde, ben c'était vraiment très excitant pour moi parce que c'est toujours ben, tellement important d'avoir la possibilité de parler de ce qu'on fait, de la démarche qui est derrière tout ce travail-là qu'on fait pendant des années. Et puis, ben, effectivement, il y a une approche qui peut toucher à l'autobiographie dans ce que je fais, mais c'est une approche, je dirais, comme par la bande, par le côté, parce qu'en fait, jamais mon intention n'a été de raconter mon histoire, mais depuis toujours, depuis que je suis artiste visuelle, depuis que j'ai toute jeune, sortie d'université, j'ai vraiment toujours senti très fort la nécessité de trouver un langage qui m'était personnel. Je ne sais pas d'où ça venait, mais je sais que c'est ça qui me menait tout le temps dans ma création, mais aussi dans tout ce qui m'intéressait, dans les autres créations autour, dans mes lectures. Alors, j'ai toujours été très intéressée de lire sur les parcours des autres artistes, euh, toute, euh, toute forme d'expression confondue. Alors, j'ai toujours été très intéressée par la littérature, la danse, le cinéma et toutes les autres formes d'art. Et je me suis nourrie de toutes les formes d'art, mais je me suis particulièrement nourrie euh, de, des œuvres créées par des hommes et des femmes qui avaient donc une impulsion euh, tournée vers l'intériorité, euh, sans nécessairement que ce soit de l'autobiographie, mais j'aime beaucoup aussi les autobiographies. Puis en fait, comme j'ai toujours lu beaucoup de poésie aussi, ça a comme toujours été juste naturel de parler au jeu, puis de parler des émotions qui nous traversent, sans nécessairement raconter l'histoire, mais raconter ces émotions-là qui habitent, qui sont des émotions humaines euh, qui sont des perceptions de la vie aussi. Parce que pour moi, mon regard de chercheuse qui cherche à dire, qui cherche à exprimer, c'est toujours c'est toujours par là, c'est comment je peux arriver à parler de ces grandes prises de conscience là, que je fais ou de ces grands mouvements de fond que je vois à l'intérieur de moi, de ces forces et de ces failles qui me traversent et donc que je sais qui traversent chacun de nous dans la vie. Alors, c'est vraiment par le développement du langage poétique que ça s'est fait. Pendant des années, en création visuelle, oui, il y avait de la création à travers le dessin, la photo, la sculpture, les installations, la performance. Mais à travers ça, ce que je peux voir maintenant avec le recul, parce que ça fait 40 ans que je fais de la création, ben, ce que je vois, c'est le développement du langage poétique. C'est comment je suis arrivée à trouver, à parler avec des images poétiques pour raconter ce que j'observais à l'intérieur de moi sur la vie, donc dans mon rapport à la vie. Ça a toujours été un besoin de transposer et de métaphoriser. Ce que je comprends, ce que je comprends pas, ce qui me questionne, ce qui m'interpelle. Alors, dans le fond, c'est ma matière première, moi, mais pas mon histoire, mais ce qui m'habite. Et donc, je pense que c'est surtout quand j'ai fait de la performance en art visuel que j'ai vraiment compris que c'était ce que je travaillais en fait à partir de moi. C'est là que c'est devenu le plus clair. Puis j'ai eu une période où j'ai perdu mes repères, où c'est devenu difficile dans la vie, mais le fait de faire de la psychoanalyse euh, et après d'entrer dans une démarche de quête très profonde dans la vie pour comprendre qui je suis, mais ça s'est collé beaucoup à ma vie aussi, je veux dire. Mais comme déjà comme artiste visuel, ma création et ma vie étaient comme euh, c'est ça, tisser ensemble. C'était tout naturel que je continue à aller dans cette direction-là. Mais là, comme j'étais dans un processus de guérir des blessures, des traumatismes, c'était encore plus intéressant de transcender ces grandes émotions-là, puis de trouver comment les passer à travers la création. Donc, c'est ça, il y avait la recherche d'un langage personnel. Et je pense, on m'a dit après, ah, ben c'est très personnel ce que tu fais, il y a quelque chose de très féminin. J'ai jamais pensé que je faisais un art féminin. Mais je peux comprendre qu'on puisse penser ça parce que il y a quelque chose qui est vraiment tourné vers l'intériorité. Puis je peux comprendre qu'on associe ça davantage à l'énergie féminine, l'intériorité. Mais moi, comme j'ai toujours lu beaucoup de la poésie, autant d'hommes et de femmes, puis j'ai toujours vu des films, des œuvres d'artistes visuels, mais jamais il a été question de genre par rapport à l'approche autobiographique. Fait que c'est pour ça que moi, je peux comprendre que ça soit perçu comme ça, mais pour moi, ça n'a pas un genre. C'est pas un choix de dire je veux faire de l'autobiographie parce que je suis une femme ou je sens que je suis dans un courant d'époque avec les femmes qui travaillent l'autobiographie. Il y a des femmes extraordinaires qui m'ont influencée dans la littérature, qui racontent leur parcours. Simone de Beauvoir, Simone Veil, mais il y a eu des hommes aussi. Il y a eu beaucoup d'hommes qui ont raconté à travers leur écriture. Puis ça aussi, ça m'a beaucoup influencé. Alors, c'est pour ça que moi, je n'avais pas associé ça à un genre. Mais je trouve ça intéressant de le faire avec cet éclairage-là particulier de la table ronde que vous offrez, parce que ça m'a permis de questionner qu'est-ce qui, dans ma posture de femme, a fait en sorte que j'ai fait ces choix-là. Puis, est-ce que ça m'a posé problème? Euh, Quand je suis arrivée à la marionnette, particulièrement, parce que dans ma création visuelle avant, euh, bon, j'ai toujours travaillé la représentation du corps, j'ai toujours travaillé la représentation du mouvement. C'était vraiment une obsession à travers les œuvres, toujours, même dans l'écriture. Je ne sais pas pourquoi, ben, je ne savais pas pourquoi, maintenant je le vois, mais je pense que le grand thème de mon travail, à travers toutes les années, c'est le mouvement. C'est le mouvement parce que, premièrement, à l'intérieur de moi, j'ai vu les mouvements de fond s'opérer. J'ai vu des mouvements qui m'ont transformée et j'ai vu que mettre ma vie en mouvement, ça voulait dire me prendre et avancer. Et ce désir d'être en mouvement dans ma vie, de ne pas rester pris là où je tournais mal et mal en rond, ben, ce désir d'avancer, ce désir d'être en mouvement, il se transposait dans mon désir de représenter le mouvement dans le corps toujours. Et c'est comme ça que je suis arrivée à la marionnette, puis c'était tellement évident de faire la marionnette, de mettre en mouvement. Et donc, il y a toute là, quand je suis arrivée à la marionnette, c'était vraiment formidable. Ça a été même si j'avais toujours créé des personnages, puis même des sculptures, des personnages articulés, j'avais aucune idée que c'était la marionnette. Mais là, quand je m'en suis rendu compte, c'était fascinant parce que je me dis, OK, alors je fais déjà la marionnette, il me reste maintenant à produire une œuvre, à créer l'œuvre qui est dédiée vers la scène, donc qui est une œuvre d'art vivant, ce que je n'avais jamais fait avant. Mais là, ce qui était formidable vraiment avec le langage marionnettique, c'est le vocabulaire marionnettique, il venait vraiment me donner la possibilité de démultiplier les personnages. Parce que en parlant d'intériorité, pour moi, la première chose, c'était, mais il y a différentes parts de moi qui coexistent. Il y a différentes dimensions de moi qui coexistent. Et je trouvais ça intéressant et je comprenais aussi que c'est ce que tout le monde vit, la coexistence des différentes dimensions. Et là, de pouvoir démultiplier les personnages, c'est ça qui m'a amené à Nomade. Je vais présenter, je vais partager mon écran. Oui, ici, parfait. Là, je vais vous mettre un peu de visuel, ça va être plus intéressant. Donc, c'est ça, j'ai créé des personnages, puis là, c'est passé par le masque et la marionnette. C'est assez rapidement arrivé au masque. Est-ce que vous voyez l'image en grand présentement? Est-ce que je dois peut-être lire à partir du début comme ça? Ouais. Alors, ben c'est ça. Ça m'a pris beaucoup de temps à comprendre exactement qu'est-ce que j'allais faire comme type de création parce que j'arrivais des arts visuels, puis là, j'arrivais dans complètement autre chose. Je me suis bien entourée toujours parce que j'ai pas fait ça seule, même si les spectacles étaient des solos. Il y a beaucoup il y a beaucoup de gens très proches qui, autour de moi, sont venus me soutenir dans mon travail et m'aider surtout à mettre en scène. Euh, mais au début, quand j'ai commencé avec la femme blanche, je ne savais même pas en fait qu'est-ce que je voulais faire. Avec ce personnage-là, avec le masque blanc, j'ai pris 2, 3 ans, j'ai invité différentes personnes à travailler avec moi, mais je ne savais pas quoi leur demander. Mais en fait, je me rendais juste compte que j'étais vraiment mal dans mon corps devant les gens. J'étais comme bloquée. Et en fait, ce que j'ai fini par comprendre, puis c'est avec Martha Dan que je l'ai trouvé, qui a travaillé avec moi sur le spectacle La Femme Blanche. Je lui demandais, aide-moi à me mettre en mouvement parce que je bloque, j'y arrive pas, je suis bloquée par le mouvement, alors que c'est le mouvement que j'ai cherché toute ma vie dans la création. Maintenant que je dois entrer dans le mouvement parce que comme j'habite mon univers puis que j'ai décidé de mettre un masque, je me suis retrouvée à être moi-même dans l'œuvre. Ben là, il fallait que je bouge. Alors, c'est assez formidable comme travail. Et puis, c'est un travail qui rapidement s'est présenté que ça devait être en silence, parce qu'au début, j'ai intégré des textes poétiques, mais rapidement, j'ai vu que les images étaient suffisantes. Et c'était vraiment même devenu une posture, je pense, essentielle d'affirmer la nécessité du silence pour parler de l'intériorité, parce que je pense qu'on ne peut pas aller à l'intérieur de soi si on n'entre pas dans le silence. Alors, c'est un passage obligé et je sais que ça créait parfois des malaises parce qu'il y a des gens qui n'aiment pas le silence, mais pour moi, c'était un choix et je me suis rendu compte que finalement, dans la société actuelle dans laquelle on vit, c'est même un choix politique de dire, moi, je travaille avec le silence et moi, je travaille aussi avec la beauté et l'émerveillement. C'est de ça que je veux parler parce que c'est ça qui me pousse constamment à montrer un contrepoids à tout ce chaos qui me perturbe dans la vie. Alors, ces parts de soi que j'ai développées dans le travail, c'était dans l'intériorité, ben alors la femme qui est là, mais aussi l'enfant, la vieille, et puis la part animale qui est aussi la part masculine, qui est une part de moi que j'ai appris à découvrir au travers des années, cette énergie qui me faisait peur, mais qui finalement s'est traduite par être une énergie qui était capable justement d'affronter les peurs qui me bloquaient. Alors, c'est comme ça que le personnage du loup, qui était très présent dans ma démarche d'artiste visuel avant, mais que je me questionnais toujours, mais qu'est-ce qui fait là toujours ce loup-là? C'est vraiment avec la marionnette que j'ai compris comment le loup était un guide. C'est dans les lectures sur la spiritualité autochtone et les animaux totems que j'ai vraiment compris la symbolique du loup. Donc oui, je travaille beaucoup avec la symbolique. Et puis, ce que ça m'a permis de faire, en fait, la création en marionnette, c'est donc d'habiter plusieurs personnages. Alors ici, je suis à la fois la femme et le loup qui est la marionnette. Et puis après, j'habite le costume du loup. Donc, je deviens, et de passer comme ça du personnage de la vieille au personnage de la femme, au personnage de l'enfant, du loup, pour moi, d'habiter dans mon corps chacun de ces personnages-là, ça, oui, c'est très autobiographique parce que j'ai dû faire un travail de recherche de comment j'habite ce corps-là, cette énergie-là à l'intérieur de moi. Comment je la vis dans mon corps, cette énergie-là. Et ça a été vraiment un apprentissage avec les gens qui ont travaillé autour de moi. Puis, il faut aller sur le site web pour voir, parce qu'il y a beaucoup, beaucoup de gens qui ont travaillé autour de moi. C'est sûr qu'au niveau de la mise en scène, Karine Saint-Arnaud et Myriam Larose ont été des personnes sur la ligne de front. Il y a eu Richard Morin aussi. Puis avec Karine et Myriam, je continue, je suis encore en création présentement. C'est vraiment grâce à elle que je suis arrivée à organiser toutes les images qui étaient là. Ici, dans le spectacle Âme nomade, il y avait vraiment plusieurs techniques. Et je veux juste dire que La Femme blanche, qui a été mon premier spectacle, c'était en fait un désir de faire quelque chose rapidement parce que le projet Âme nomade était déjà là depuis plusieurs années dans mon désir de créer. Mais j'avais pas les moyens, puis j'étais pas prête parce que il me restait à explorer la technique d'animation, stop motion et puis la vidéo. J'étais pas prête à commencer. Et puis La Femme blanche, donc, ça a été une espèce de condensé de ce que j'allais faire avec Âme nomade, c'est-à-dire les différentes parts de soi qui se rencontrent à l'intérieur et le fait de jouer avec les échelles, donc de pouvoir parler de la dynamique entre ces parts de soi-là qui nous habitent à l'intérieur. Parce que ici, l'enfant, elle est géante, c'est moi qui est dans le masque. Mais quand, je sais pas si je peux reculer. Attendez, je vais arrêter le diaporama, puis je vais revenir à l'image ici. OK. Alors ici, dans l'image, le loup, moi j'habite le personnage du loup. Présentement, c'est pas une marionnette, c'est moi qui est dans le costume avec le masque. Et la marionnette enfant, elle est dans ses mains, elle est toute petite. Alors, pour moi, de pouvoir passer dans un nomade de, de l'enfant géant, de l'enfant minuscule, et puis après de l'enfant géant, pour moi, tout ça, ces rapports de proportion-là, ces rapports d'échelle, la marionnette, elle me permet de faire ça. Et pour moi, c'est très puissant d'utiliser ce vocabulaire-là qui est spécifique à la marionnette. Parler justement comme ici, c'était vraiment important pour moi que la femme et le loup soient à la même échelle. Parce que pour moi, c'était important d'exprimer que s'il y avait eu un déséquilibre avant avec ce loup qui était surdimensionné par rapport à l'enfant, mais après, il y avait aussi cette possibilité-là qu'il y ait une part égalitaire entre la part d'hommes et de femmes. Et ça, évidemment, ça a rapport avec dans ma vie aussi, parce que tout ce qui passe dans la vie personnelle, la vie sociale, elle se traduisait à l'intérieur de moi et dans mon désir d'affirmation, mon désir d'oser m'affirmer, moi, à travers ma création. Alors, c'est fascinant, un parcours sur une vie. Je, j'en dis des petites bribes ici, mais je trouve vraiment que c'est un voyage formidable. Ça fait
Magali,
oui, il reste une minute.
5 minutes.
OK, merci. Ça fait 40 ans que je fais ce dialogue-là, que j'entretiens ce dialogue-là avec la création. Et c'est la relation la plus constante que j'ai eue dans ma vie. Cette relation d'intimité-là avec, dans ce dialogue avec la création, dans ma recherche de comment je veux arriver à créer. Je vous montre ce croquis-là parce que c'est le croquis de départ de l'œuvre sur laquelle je travaille présentement, qui est Amsa, parce que présentement, je voulais vraiment revenir à habiter l'enfant, parce que j'ai adoré habiter l'enfant dans le nomade. Wow, retrouver cette énergie-là d'avoir, je sais pas, 3, 4, 5 ans, d'être dans la spontanéité, dans la pureté, l'innocence et dans l'émerveillement de cet âge-là, j'avais vraiment envie d'en faire quelque chose parce que je trouve que c'est d'une beauté et qu'on oublie cette essence intérieure-là qu'on a, qui est l'enfant, qui continue toujours de nous habiter. Et là, avec Amsar, ben, c'était vraiment l'enfant sauvage que j'avais envie de mettre de l'avant, cet enfant-là qui est très connecté à la nature. Parce que c'est moi, oui, j'étais une enfant qui a grandi à la campagne, j'étais une enfant solitaire qui était observatrice de tout, de la nature et que j'aimais beaucoup. Mais je sais qu'aussi les enfants sont comme ça. J'ai une petite fille maintenant et je le vis beaucoup avec elle. Fait que j'ai transposé donc cette image-là et j'ai trouvé comment habiter l'enfant. Ça s'est élaboré beaucoup depuis Âme nomade. Je travaille encore beaucoup avec Karine Saint-Arnaud et Myriam Larose pour aller au bout de ça. Mais là, il y a plein de marionnettes qui sont apparues et puis les marionnettes, c'est moi la marionnette sur scène, c'est sûr, c'est l'enfant qui est là, mais aussi tous les animaux qu'elle rencontre et c'est les passages furtifs en fait de quand on est en forêt. Alors c'est ça qui est vraiment le fun à faire. C'est un projet de trilogie, âme sœur. Alors, la performance poétique, c'est la première étape. Il y a tout le projet de bande dessinée qui va suivre, qui est toujours cet enfant-là à la recherche, qui part dans la nature. Alors, c'est comme une autre façon de dire, j'aime beaucoup dans la trilogie, de prendre l'idée du rassemblement de l'enfant avec la nature, mais de l'aborder de 3 points de vue différents. Et dans la bande dessinée, il y a tout le rapport au corps aussi, parce que la séquence de mouvement, elle m'intéresse beaucoup. Alors, ça va être une bande visuelle parce qu'il va y avoir photo et dessin. Et donc, ça va être intéressant pour moi d'intégrer les deux. Et puis, les personnages de Âme nomade, ils sont présents toujours parce que, oui, à la recherche des animaux, mais ces personnages-là sont toujours là. Et puis, la troisième part de la trilogie, je veux revenir à cette idée-là totémique, mais cette fois-ci avec vraiment beaucoup les animaux tout au long de l'image, tous les animaux qui sont réunis dans cette espèce de structure verticale qui, pour moi, est très forte, qui montre que l'humain et l'animal et la nature, on est connectés ensemble, puis on est fort. Moi, je me sens reliée à ça et je trouve ça vraiment important de parler de cette connexion-là qu'on a au vivant parce que je trouve que c'est beau, puis on entend tellement de choses bouleversante au sujet de ce qui se passe. Puis je m'obstine à vouloir continuer à parler du beau parce que je pense qu'il faut être plus que jamais connecté à la nature, puis à ce qui nous environne pour être conscient de cette importance-là, puis qu'on n'est qu'un élément infime dans le tout aussi. Alors, je pense que je suis presque rendue à la fin. J'aurais pu finir avec la vidéo d'un travail aussi, mais je ne veux pas dépasser. Alors, je ne sais pas s'il y a des questions pour terminer. Ça me ferait plaisir de répondre à des questions. Peut-être que c'est plus tard aussi.
Thank you so much, Magali. We're going to have a discussion later and there will be time for questions.
Parfait.
We were just going to do, obviously not translating the whole thing, but we're just going to do a very quick summary of what you said, first in Italian and,
OK.
and then in English.
Plusieurs personnes n'ont pas compris parce que je parle en français alors.
It's fine, Magali.
Désolée.
No, please don't apologize. We made a choice to ask people to choose the presentation language, but just in case there are people who haven't understood at all, we are going to do a quick summary.
Merci.
Provo così a sintetizzare, le cose interessanti sono moltissime. Mi ha colpito molto, Magali insisteva sulla necessità di esprimere l'interiorità e anche sarà utile nella discussione comparare questo con i procedimenti invece di Gael, che sono apparentemente lontani con molti punti comuni. L'altro aspetto che ha sottolineato lungo tutto l'intervento è la relazione tra l'io e il noi, il me e l'universalità e dunque la dimensione politica per magari parlare e prendere una posizione politica significa esprimerla tramite il silenzio, anche questa è una differenza rispetto alle altre poetiche. Un altro punto importante, il movimento, interessante anche il fatto che abbia più volte ricordato come questa occasione le abbia dato modo di riflettere sui suoi procedimenti, quindi non sono procedimenti programmatici a priori, ma crea, come gli artisti e le artiste fanno, e poi ha messo insieme questa serie di analisi, autoanalisi, considerazioni, e in questo identifica la marionetta come un linguaggio privilegiato di contenuti, di esigenze, di necessità che esprimeva già nel suo lavoro di artista visiva. La marionetta è dunque il movimento. Poi si è soffermata molto su queste immagini magnifiche di Nomad, è un spettacolo davvero straordinario. E l'altro tratto che metterei in evidenza, poi magari ci ritorniamo anche nella discussione, la molteplicità, una parola che avevamo messo in luce fin dall'inizio. Tramite la figura, la marionetta, il visuale, questi codici linguistici, magari sa esprimere la molteplicità, l'animalità che per lei è il maschile, ma la bambina, la dimensione dell'infanzia, habiter l'enfant, ha ripetuto più volte, quindi abitare l'infanzia. E anche qui credo che la figura, la marionetta siano un mezzo di trasfigurazione e di moltiplicazione appunto delle identità per arrivare alla propria interiorità. Per motivi di tempo,
now I'm going to do the same in English for anyone who doesn't speak French or Italian. Magali was talking about her process as an artist, coming from visual art and finding puppetry as a good form to express her internal self. She didn't set out to make women's work, and she didn't set out to make autobiographical work, but it has evolved that her life and her work have become completely intertwined, and there's a huge sense of journey in her work. So she works with a multiplicity of forms, from visual art, puppetry, movement, and one theme that came up very importantly was the aspect of silence, that she works with silence as a choice, and notes that for many people, this can be a problem because we are used to sound all around, but she prefers to base her work on the visual images. And in particular, she works very metaphorically. So everything she does has provokes images, both in herself and in the spectator. So it's an encounter, the kind of work she does, where different parts of herself, and we can see in her work, there's often different puppets of the same self in different sizes. She says that different parts of herself meet inside and go on a metaphorical journey together, so they are in dialogue. She clearly also includes animals in her work, which represent different energies, including masculine energy. For her own body, the exploration of the body, the human themselves is also a puppet in her work. And the project that she was mostly showing us images of was Nomad, which is nomadic soul. Who goes on a journey, encounters different animals, different parts of herself. And she also highlighted the importance of childhood and how important the presentation of childhood and herself as a child is significant in her work. So it's the presentation of self across different landscapes, different metaphorical landscapes, different encounters, different ages, working with this huge multiplicity of forms in metaphorical meeting places which develop awareness of what lives inside oneself. So we have now come to time for a break. We're going to have a 20-minute coffee break, and please 15. We're gonna aim for a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back for
all the people that are connected, so you can switch off for 15 minutes for saying pause, and we will see back on say 11:50. Okay, thank you so much for being with us. It's 5 o'clock for you in the morning.
Yes. Ben ritrovati, ben ritrovati. Molto rapidamente presento la nostra prossima ospite, Cristiano. Felici di ospitare con noi, di ospitare qui. È professoressa alla scuola di arti visive dell'Università di Boston. È stata direttrice di un progetto su donne e marionette, progetto a lungo termine, che poi è confluito in un progetto delle cosiddette digital humanities. E ha da sempre un interesse specifico sulle opere artistiche delle donne, femminile. Ha collaborato ad un capitolo su Ingrid Aspery's, in particolare sullo spettacolo Chantal Noir, Making Meaning in Puppetry, Materiality, Performance, Perception, a cura di Alissa Mello, Dassia Postner e Claudia Orenstein. E sta pubblicando un libro molto interessante su donne, marionette, maschere e le loro relazioni con il corpo. Aggiungo solo che per questo progetto è anche il soggiorno di ricerca in Italia, in particolare a Padova, anche presso il Museo Sartori delle Maschere, no, qui rappresentante Sara Sartori. Ed è in questa occasione, in questi suoi percorsi, che ci siamo incontrati a Padova, e si diceva poco fa come è bello anche sempre sfruttare queste convergenze non casuali. Grazie Felice. Ci parlerà, scusate, dell'opera di Theodora Spitares, di cui ci racconta lei. Grazie.
Okay, I'm going to speak in English. I will try to speak slowly. So I just want to thank Roberta and Cariad and Cristina for this opportunity and for me, but also for the opportunity to speak about Theodora Skipetares. I think she's less known in Europe than she is in the United States, but even in the United States, I think she is less known than she should be for the impact that she has had on contemporary puppetry. There will be many of the same themes that have emerged today in her work, not surprisingly, I guess, but also very happily. Domestic materiality, the body, the self-portrait as a form of material autobiography, intimacy, truth, multiplicity. So Theodora Skipetares is an award-winning American puppetry artist who's been making performances in New York City for more than 50 years. And in many ways, she really contributed to the transformation of puppetry. A synthesis of feminist art, body art, and the strategies and the ethos of performance art, and even Fluxus, have influenced her work and in turn have influenced puppetry through her. She also has spent extended times in other countries, in India, in Japan, and these have also infused her work as well. John Bell, very eminent puppetry scholar from the United States, has said that she is part of the wave of interest in puppetry from visual artists in the 60s and 70s who found their way into the medium unencumbered by tradition. And that's certainly the case with Theodora Skipetares. She didn't intend to become a puppeteer or a puppetry artist, and yet she did. So Skipetares has been very steady. It's almost as though, I think she lives in a way in which she sees things in the world. She reads a scrap of news. She gets interested in some primary text. And before you know it, it's like another show is growing inside of her. So she's really been able to make about an average of more than, I would say more than one large piece every 2 years. I mean, it's just incredible the amount of work she's done. These are mammoth undertakings with sometimes hundreds of objects, projection, working at different scales in different forms of puppetry. She also commissions new compositions using some of the same text that she uses for the inspiration that, to create both the figures, but also the text that really infuses her pieces. Her pieces tend to have a lot of text in them, but drawn from all different places. Okay, so today we're discussing autobiography, and it's a little complex to trace with Skipetars. So I kind of stumbled upon sort of I don't know, kind of a schema as I was going. I think part of the reason it's difficult to trace it is because the way that she has embraced the fiction of puppetry in terms of telling the truth. She says, puppets are such a sensational lie of their own, but a very innocent lie, that I don't think you can ask them to support anything but the truth. In this particular moment, perhaps Skipetars' work retains only traces of this autobiographical impulse that she started with. I recently saw her newest show called 4 Lives. And in the show, you encounter some figures, you encounter historical figures like Charles Darwin, Marie Curie, also some gods as well. But in general, the show that she recently created really decenters the human and really pays attention to the natural world, the animals, the vegetables, the minerals. So I was thinking about, in a way, you could look at her trajectory as almost moving out into these external orbits, as though she kind of started in the 1970s, like her own son, working with her own body, her own stories, her own identity. And as the years have progressed, she has moved to increasingly external orbits because of just her commitment in general that is extended to the rest of the world. She has said that, at a certain point, autobiography just wasn't enough. And there were other stories she needed to tell, other people that she needed to highlight. So thinking about sort of these orbits and this recent show in which we were almost leaving the human world and we're imagining a world that will continue to exist even when we're gone and possibly even, improved. So Skipetars' debut was a piece that was called Mask Performance that she did in 1975. She came out of sculpture and also set design, costume design. That was her background. So she had made 72 masks. And so she performed them. Each of them had a subtly distinct variation of her own face. So all cast from her face. Felix Bernstein says Skipetars chose one of the masks to perform with, allowing her to embody and disembody herself through voice and gesture, an auto-objectification that presaged. There's an English word that honestly I've never said out loud before. There's always got to be one of those. But anyway, so it really predicted this kind of emergence into puppetry. Thanks to Sara Sartori, who through her family's research, they have realized that a lot of the function of the ancient Greek masks was to be vibraphonic. It changed the sound. And she said that she felt this way wearing these masks. She felt a vibration that was like a feedback to her own body. In the next few years, puppetry began to overtake her performances. She moved further and further into the background and eventually into the seat of the director. Joan Driscoll Lynch argues that Skipetars' work was a stark contrast to the action, improvisation, and spontaneous orientation of the 60s and 70s performance world. Her undead objects disrupted the craving for presence, common to both canonical performance art and conventional method acting. Yet she was also disinterested in the escapism of traditional approaches to theater. So she's really working in this kind of intermedial territory. Skipetars' pieces are known for the rich and diversely sourced text, as I mentioned earlier, often delivered by a puppet. However, she also comes from a material world, as I said, trained as a sculptor. She says that her earliest performances in the late 70s featured objects, which were masks or costumes that were extensions of her own body, dresses, skirts of unusual materials. One was 3,000 walnut shells. Another was 90 pounds of glass. She wore dozens of fresh fish as a costume in one of her performances. These wearables directly interacted with her body. They created weight, I think in the case of the glass, potentially a little danger, maybe in the case of the fish, potentially a little smell. And they were also hours of lived labor, if you think about how much time, and that was really a feminist kind of ethic in performance as well, is just the body and the hours of labor, the hours of your life that you give to creating a piece. And so she, I think, has continued that throughout her work. So Skipetares really emerged at a time during second wave feminism, the 60s and 70s in the United States. One thing that's kind of important to understand is this was not a centralized, unified movement. It was a very fractured movement with many different ideas about the correct way forward, strategies, sensibilities, etc. And so this expression, the personal is political, emerged, and it emerged out of a conflict. There were feminists that were perhaps more political feminists, but there was also all of the stuff that we call consciousness raising groups and things like that that were happening at that time, where women would meet and they would share their stories, and they would discover that someone else had experienced domestic violence, somebody else had realized they were getting paid half what the man in the office was getting paid, et cetera. And they would share these experiences, but they also shared them in a way that they understood that there wasn't an individual solution, that this needed to be a larger political solution to what was grounded, though, in the personal, and also what was grounded in the body. So a lot of the concerns of the second wave feminists were really about the body. They were access to abortion, safety from physical and sexual violence, like all of the women's shelters and things were set up during that time, equal pay, even daycare for children, et cetera. And there was a tension because sometimes you have the people who are advancing political agendas disconnected from the body and disconnected from the real experience. So there was that tension there. The personal is political was a response to that idea that there has to be that balance and there has to be an informing of both directions. And I think this really affected, Skipetares' work and just autobiographical work in general. So not only Skipetares, but even men were, I think, influenced by a lot of the feminist art movement. One of the people that was a big influence for Theodore Skipetares was her friend Spalding Gray, and she mentions that he really made an entire career always mining autobiography, always using his own life. She, as I mentioned before, found that there came a moment in which it wasn't enough. There were things she wanted to talk about and do that weren't about her. But still, really in admiration of that, of the autobiographical impulse that, that he was able to sustain. This is sort of a mantra of feminist performance art, feminist body art, real bodies in real time and real space. And you can see the tension there with puppetry. So there's tension, but that's good. So Skipetares began her career in this era, and she also began in venues that highly encouraged experimentalism. New York was a really gritty, rough place at that time. It was a bankrupt city. Many of the landlords literally walked away from their buildings and just left them. There were storefronts everywhere where people could she said she could just show up and say, I have an idea I want to try out tonight. And they would be like, yeah, sure, what time? And so there was a part of that was really important for her to be able to create the work that she created. It was also a dangerous time, though, too. Many of the places that these artists lived, they were really in danger. So for her, she started out and her body was in the performance, but at the same time, so were a lot of objects and costumes, even from the very beginning. And she also noted that even when, actually maybe perhaps especially when there was autobiographical content, that she often would perform veiled or masked. So perhaps her body was there, perhaps there was autobiographical content, but she had this impulse to cover her own face with a veil, with a mask. She says, in my autobiographical work, I was always veiled and masked. The puppets freed me. They can bleed on stage. They can vomit, and one did. And they can provide intensity that remains at a distance. She also used projection as a veil. And she also used surrogate bodies, I would argue, in the form of some of the costumes, the masks, these props that she has hanging. There was something very theatrical about her work from the very beginning, and maybe nobody should have been that surprised when she moved into puppetry, but people were, and some people were actually quite disappointed. Martha Wilson, who started Franklin Furnace, which is one of the really important centers of performance art in New York at that time, supported Theodora, hosted a lot of her performances, and she said, I was disappointed when she left performance art and went to puppetry. I mean, they're still very close friends, and I think everyone is, you know, so grateful that Theodora ventured in the direction she did. But there were certain kind of hermeneutics that they were using in feminist body art they were tools to really talk about subjectivity. And, you know, puppetry, there was a little bit of a tension there again. So how did it happen? Where did this turn to objects happen? So in many senses, as I said, they were always there from the start. There was the real body in real time and real space, with a bunch of objects, masks, costumes, and set pieces that moved. However, the puppet appeared. If you look very closely at this image from a performance in 1977, one of Skipetari's first, you will perhaps note that there is a small figure to the left. It's a little dark in this image, but there is a tiny little Theodora there. And it was a seed, perhaps not the only seed, but it was a seed of this move towards puppetry. Skipetari said, I had made the Theodora sculpture in the 1970s before I began to perform. I had made many multiples of them, maybe 30 or so, and they sat in a line along one wall of my studio. I first took one and cut it up and then restitched it for its debut in Venus Cafe. From then on, I used them repeatedly and simply kept on casting them over and over them. I used them intensively until 1996. I asked Skipetaris how the figure was animated and the role that it played in this piece. She said it was a substitute for her. This particular piece, she said, she describes as very fragmented, but it addressed, among other issues, gossip within the Greek American, Skipetaris is Greek American, within the Greek American and Greek society, and the way that gossip functioned around women who escaped or women who kind of left town. And so at a certain point, she is speaking back with a microphone, the actress is, and this little figure begins to hit the wall, almost to protest, to say stop, to say enough. And that was kind of the beginning of her foray into puppetry. So this figure appeared off and on. The next piece, the figure did not appear, but then reappeared. Often the figure would be disguised, kind of cast, but then altered. Perhaps it represented a male character, someone completely different than her. But still, thinking about how Simone de Beauvoir says that, you know, men can play the male, they can play the universal, and they can play the neutral. And usually women are relegated to the specific. Theodora she sort of flips this on its head, because if she is the body and the face of everything in these universes she creates, she becomes the neutral, she becomes the universal. And so here's just a few more images. This is from a remounting of aspects of this piece. It's one of the things that makes me the saddest is I'll never be able to sit in the audience and see these pieces she made in, you know, in the 1970s, but they did a beautiful remount of aspects of this show Micropolis, and you can see the little Theodoras here. This is just, I put this here just to kind of see the first kind of larger productions that she did. And you know, she really, as I mentioned in the beginning, moving farther and farther away from autobiography, farther and farther away from her body. She doesn't appear in Sky Saver. She doesn't even animate after Micropolis. So you can see that in those years there wasn't that many before she transitioned. These are just a couple more images. You know, these kind of images, you can see her concern for the female body. These were midwives, and this woman is in labor and she wants to give birth. And the midwives are, it's like almost an opera. And they're telling her, no, no, she needs to wait for this moment of auspicious birth, you know? And so this poor woman with contractions, etc., has to wait until the time is right. I probably am about out of time, right? Because we're running a little late. Yeah, I'm out of time. Okay. Well, anyway, she's an absolutely wonderful artist, and thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak about her.
So there are some other artists and colleagues that are online on Zoom, and we would like to give to them the voice. I'm speaking about Alessandra Miccarelli, Alissa Mello, Claudia Ornstein, Valeria Sacco, and Fabiana Iacuzzi. Now I can see you. One moment. Yes. Who would like to speak before Alessandra? Va bene per te? Essere la prima?
Va bene, rompo il ghiaccio.
Grazie.
Buongiorno a tutte, a tutti.
Buongiorno.
Grazie per questo.
Ti salutano anche tutti gli studenti di Animateria.
Grazie a tutti, grazie per questa interessantissima conferenza. Io parlo in italiano, voi tradurrete, non so.
Sì, c'è Sofia che sta traducendo, un'altra animaterica ex che sta traducendo.
Roberta, puoi ripetere per quelli collegati su Zoom eventualmente? Questa cosa dell'audio in inglese?
Dillo. Un attimo solo che Angela...
So again, on Zoom, you can select the language in which you want to listen, so English or Italian.
Ok, quindi io parlo tranquillamente in italiano allora.
Sì.
Allora, grazie, dovevo essere presente, non è stato possibile. La conferenza è estremamente interessante. E io faccio un brevissimo intervento dopo aver ascoltato le intense presenze delle artiste invitate e anche l'intervento di Alissa veramente interessante. Faccio solo un piccolo punto di suggestione, di riflessione rispetto a quello che è stato esposto questa mattina e parto dall'esperienza di Anima Tazin, questa fanzine che insieme a Valeria Sacco, che è presente anche lei online qui con me, siamo tutte e due presenti. Questa fanzine è stata creata circa 3 anni fa e nell'arco della sua esperienza editoriale ha avuto occasione di poter intervistare un certo numero di artiste e artisti, marionettisti del mondo. E la ricorrenza che noi abbiamo osservato rispetto al tema della biografia, declinato in tutte le sue sfumature possibili, e che possiamo constatare, è che ci siamo accorte che praticamente tutte le artiste marionettiste che abbiamo intervistato partono da una riflessione che ha a che fare con la biografia, ma intesa in senso ampio, perché può essere una biografia aneddotica di eventi accaduti nella vita, una biografia più legata all'intimità, una biografia legata alla percezione interiore del mondo, una biografia emotiva. E tutte le artiste che abbiamo intervistato partono da questo punto per poi sviluppare un loro linguaggio, affermando più o meno all'interno delle loro opere degli elementi in connessione appunto con l'elemento biografico. Per esempio, tra le tante che abbiamo intervistato, Possiamo citare il caso di Patricia Gomis, Mambi Mawin e di Hélène Ducharme, che partendo proprio dalla loro biografia, dalla loro esperienza rispetto alla relazione con l'elemento acqua nei loro territori diversi, l'Africa e il Canada, hanno poi creato uno spettacolo che tratteggia appunto momenti biografici della storia che loro hanno avuto rispetto a questo elemento nella loro infanzia. Ma abbiamo anche esperienze come quella di Elise Vigneron, di Marjane Kanen, di Aja Marnevek o Zara Sabri, di Dina Higstall, che tutte hanno citato delle relazioni o situazioni di ricordi legati all'infanzia o legati alla loro percezione del mondo, molto intimi, che poi si sono tradotte in ricerche, sperimentazioni e linguaggi espressivi, senza necessariamente però poi citarli all'interno della loro opera. E notiamo che invece gli artisti, tutti i marionettisti, uomini che abbiamo intervistato, invece questo elemento biografico o intimo non lo citano come elemento fondante della loro opera. Questo è un primo punto che noi possiamo notare come casualmente, perché Animata Zina, avendo comunque non è rappresentativa se non di uno spacco così casuale, diciamo, del panorama artistico, marionettistico del mondo, ma è comunque una ricorrenza che volevamo sottolineare e che ci fa pensare come riflessione, e questa è una riflessione nostra, personale, che fondamentalmente possiamo pensare che l'immaginario maschile nel tempo, nei secoli, si è potuto affermare, ha potuto plasmare il mondo e gli uomini, diciamo, l'aspetto maschile ha più possibilità di muoversi all'interno dell'immaginario che è stato plasmato nel tempo. Mentre l'immaginario femminile ha ancora bisogno di emergere, ha ancora bisogno di affermarsi per poter plasmare un mondo diverso, un altro mondo. Ecco, questo è quello che brevemente possiamo suggerire come suggestione, come riflessione rispetto all'esperienza che abbiamo avuto con Animata Zine e anche rispetto a quello che abbiamo sentito questa mattina dagli interventi.
Grazie Ale, volevo sapere se Valeria per caso voleva aggiungere qualcosa, visto che lavorate insieme all'animazione.
Sì, buongiorno a tutti. Sì, in realtà ci siamo sentite con Ale.
Anche un attimo, fate un attimo, applauso sempre per la Vale. I bambini.
Mi sentite?
Sì, sentiamo.
Ok, no, in realtà ci siamo sentite con Ale, quindi in qualche modo abbiamo un po' condiviso questa riflessione e io anche sono davvero felice di aver seguito la conferenza, è stata molto interessante. E, forse l'unica altra riflessione che mi viene da aggiungere molto rapidamente è solo, mi chiedevo rispetto a questa differenza, diciamo, è stato molto bello sentire eh, queste poetiche tanto differenti. Mi sembra davvero che ci siano un po' degli estremi che poi hanno dei punti di congiunzione molto forti. E mi viene solo da sottolineare, forse come mi chiedo da pubblico, pensavo a dei processi a quale processo, a quale contatto avviene quando si sente l'emergere di un'autobiografia in un'opera. E allora mi venivano in mente queste due riflessioni, da un lato come un processo più di identificazione o un processo di immedesimazione, laddove ad esempio in un lavoro in cui l'opera autobiografica emerge, l'esperienza autobiografica emerge in maniera esplicita, lo spettatore ha davvero l'occasione di riconoscersi e di identificarsi e di ritrovare un pezzo della propria storia e quindi c'è un certo movimento e quando invece l'opera attinge dall'autobiografia, ma in realtà rimane in una forma più metaforica, lo spettatore ha un movimento, credo, diverso, davvero riconoscere uno stato, riconoscere una presenza, riconoscere forse un punto di vista sul mondo. E quindi un processo forse più proprio di immedesimazione, per questo mi venivano questi due termini, identificazione e immedesimazione. Ed è molto affascinante aver ascoltato queste polarità, e poter proprio un po' anche quindi entrare dentro tutti i canali che possono attivare la relazione col pubblico insomma, quindi grazie di avere mosso tante riflessioni stamattina.
Grazie Valeria. Se vogliamo continuare con l'italiano così non switch off, switch on the telephone, we can go on with Fabiana Iacozzilli.
Sì, buongiorno a tutte e a tutti. Grazie di avermi invitata. Io devo dire, insomma, Roberta lo sa, purtroppo avevo degli impegni precedentemente presi, per cui mi sono, insomma, connessa da 10 minuti, un quarto d'ora e non ho potuto assistere agli altri interventi. Mi spiace moltissimo. Un secondo che mi chiede qualcosa Zoom. Ok. Allora, il mio intervento parte probabilmente anche da questa ultima domanda, riflessione che è stata fatta, no? Come si arriva alla identificazione o alla immedesimazione. Molto interessante questo spunto di riflessione. Io, per chi insomma non mi conosce, in realtà sono insomma una regista che nasce come insomma, una regista che si muove nell'ambito del teatro contemporaneo di ricerca, e sono arrivata al teatro di figura solamente nel 2019, quindi il mio intervento forse ha più a che fare con il motivo per il quale sono arrivata al teatro di figura, in un progetto in cui per me era fondamentale mettere al centro della narrazione un pezzo della mia vita, della mia storia. Perché in questo spettacolo in cui io ho utilizzato il linguaggio del teatro di figura, la classe, ho raccontato la mia infanzia, un periodo della mia infanzia in cui sono stata all'interno di un istituto di suore insieme a altri 30 bambini, e all'interno di questo istituto di suore, insomma, i metodi educativi erano molto violenti. E in questo spettacolo, quando ho iniziato a lavorare a questo spettacolo, perché sentivo la necessità di esprimere e quindi condividere questo ricordo, mi sono chiesta a lungo quale potesse essere il linguaggio giusto, che potesse al meglio raccontare questo pezzo della mia autobiografia. E sono arrivata, dopo lunghe riflessioni, al teatro di figura, proprio perché per me la domanda sull'autobiografia è: come posso io cercare di rendere universale qualcosa che parte da un mio paesaggio interiore e che quindi è strettamente connesso a un mio ricordo, che rischia però di rimanere personale. Quindi la domanda che mi ponevo era: come si può arrivare dal personale all'universale? E per questo credo di essere arrivata al teatro di figura, perché secondo me ci si medesima in un'immagine, e l'immagine che il teatro di figura mi consentiva di ricostruire di queste carcasse di miei ricordi era qualcosa che riusciva probabilmente a rendere quella materia che volevo trattare una materia universale. E quindi credo che questo sia stato il vero motivo per cui io ho incontrato sul mio cammino, sul mio percorso artistico, il teatro di figura. Perché credo che le artiste che si occupano, le artiste e gli artisti che si occupano di autobiografia, insomma, si debbano sempre cercare di porre questo tipo di domanda, perché il rischio di rimanere, come dire, arginati nel proprio mondo interiore è comunque molto presente. Per cui la domanda che ci siamo fatte insieme a Fiammetta Mandic, che è la scenografa e insomma, l'artista che ha costruito i puppets, è stata proprio questa: come possiamo noi fare in modo che questi miei compagni di classe diventino i compagni di classe di tutte e tutti, come possiamo renderli i compagni di classe che ognuno di noi ricorda nella propria infanzia. Questo spettacolo abbiamo poi deciso di sottotitolarlo un docu puppets, proprio perché un altro aspetto secondo me interessante nell'utilizzo del teatro di figura, nel raccontare un pezzo della mia biografia attraverso il teatro di figura, è stato, come dire, creare una sorta di cortocircuito e quindi avere un'immagine che fosse un'immagine svuotata dal sentimentalismo della materia e che quindi fosse, come posso dire, anche molto oggettiva, e al tempo stesso appunto creare questo cortocircuito scenico, perché a questa immagine veniva accompagnata dalle tracce audio delle interviste che io per circa 5-6 mesi ho condotto insieme a insomma, il mio assistente Francesco Meloni, in cui io ho intervistato tutti o quasi tutti i miei compagni che avevano vissuto insieme a me quel pezzo di vita. Quindi questo secondo me è molto interessante. Non so quali sono stati gli interventi che mi hanno preceduta, però sì, portare un po' l'attenzione a questa domanda, come possiamo sempre rendere universale un'immagine che probabilmente potrebbe rischiare di rimanere insomma in un mondo interiore.
Grazie Fabiana, ascolta, tanto tutto registrato, lo puoi vedere anche su YouTube e poi comunque ti daremo una registrazione. Grazie per il tuo intervento.
Grazie a voi.
E passiamo la parola a Claudia Onstein.
And she sent a message saying that she would not be there for the whole thing because of the time in the US.
On était invité à répondre à sa question. J'ai pas bien saisi. Are we invited to answer her question?
Not yet. We will come to questions. Right now, we are seeing if we've got Claudia Orenstein, and Mary Boyd online, and if so, we'd like to invite them to.
We have a message by Alissa Mello, if you like. Thank you. I've unfortunately lost my voice and I'm not able to speak at this time. Please share my thanks to the artists, speakers, and organizers for the effective and much needed conversations. There is so much to explore, and I look forward to the many shapes this will take. I do want to share that the forthcoming fall-winter issue of UNIMA, USA's Puppetry International, is returning to the theme of women and puppetry. Thank you for creating space for this dialogue. This is Alissa Mello. So, okay. There is somebody that is connected that is like, that is a pleasure to speak, to say something about his experience or about what we spoke to this morning. And we ask also in the audience if there is somebody that would like to have a speech.
Or questions or comments or clarifications. So we're open to the whole, all participants, in person and online.
Karia, I think that there is Mary Boyd connected. Yeah. I don't know.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Mari.
Thank you for Japan. If you want
I can hear you. Great.
Perfect. We will see you very well.
Listening to all this has been very, very interesting. I was a little taken aback. I of course, didn't participate in the morning session, but I was taken aback at the content of what was shared in the autobiographical. It was all about negative or bad experiences, right? And it reminded me in a way to a play that was made in the 1980s in Japan by an all-women's group called Bluebird, right? And they had the collective name Ichidore as their author, right? It was a group of like 5-6 women, but they had a collective name that they used. They didn't use their individual names. And they wanted to make a play that they had never seen a man write or perform. And what happened was they made this play called Having Eaten the Blue Fruit. That's a direct translation. The translator made it Miss Toyoko's departure, because she's an elderly person who's heading towards death, but her caretakers feel that she's not facing up to the fact that she has to die one day, right? And she's acting out like a little kid a lot of the times. So she has 4 caretakers who are always running after her and trying to kind of restrain her actions. The caretakers are all female. Okay, so with that play, it was different from men's plays, right? To have this elderly woman, and all her memories are of the very young childhood, right? And what do men do when they recollect, or maybe women up till then? What do? They usually remember like having an argument with their husband, or having a fight or a divorce, or some bad things, as well as the wedding and all those positive things. But this one, the Bluebird play, they skipped all that and went back to kind of infancy or kindergarten age, and they never dealt with the male-female problems, right? Or adult personal problems. And so it's, though they did write a play that they felt that men usually don't write, okay, they seem to avoid all the negativity, all the buildup of tension, and things that are very difficult to say in public, right? They didn't really deal with the hardship of being female in conflict with men or other women. So I think this is a really good way of using puppetry. I'm not sure that this play, the one that I've been talking about, is actually autobiographical. I think they imagine some situations as well as dipping back into their own childhoods, right? But it was a collective attempt, and it was so different from what I've seen just now today, the last couple of hours, right? That it's quite horrifying. It's like going back to the Grimm's tales, that were not written, well, written for children, but were much worse than they were. They had to be cleaned up to make it really available for modern kids. So, so thank you for that. You've given me an insight into what can be done. Right? That women don't necessarily go back to just kids stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And if there is some question from the audience or from the people that are connected on Zoom, please, it's the time now to do this. So Elena, if you want, also Elena asked before. Please, puoi parlare.
Hello, everybody. It was really amazing appointment today, and I want to thank you all. And I was thinking when I'm a dancer, when I was in actually a dance maker, and my teacher used to tell me, you don't want to be too much autobiographical. autobiographical because people don't really.
Oh, I'm sorry.
C'è qualche problema che
Elena?
non so perché.
It was not so interesting. Okay, sorry. Hello, everybody. I'm a dancer, dance maker, actually. And when I was in school, my teacher used to tell me, you don't want to be too much autobiographical. You know, I was just thinking about this because people don't really care of your own business. And I was thinking, they all yesterday when I was watching this performance, that actually there is a it's very difficult to be so much intimated at the same time universal, you know. That's what I think I did immensely in a very amazing way. So I want to thank you. And I want to say that I'm not agreeing with what my teacher used to tell me. But I think it's very difficult, you know, to give a universal message and yet to be very intimate. But my question is, talking about, I cannot see you, but it's okay. The question is how can we engage in this violence, like gender violence that Yael was touching yesterday, and not to enter into this kind of gender fight. I don't know if I can express myself. You know, it seems like we are going into, it's difficult to create peace in the gender world, in the intimate world, in the worldwide situation. You know, what is the cultural action that we are supposed to do, or that we think we should do in this moment? I don't know if it's clear, my question.
Chiaro. Yael, do you want to answer? Yes. Yael will try to answer.
I cannot see you. Yes, anyway.
Elena, it's up to you, because we will see you.
Okay.
Devi mettere vista galleria, vista oratorio.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much for what you said. So I think the question is how we persevere also on the way. And for me, I think time and patience, like for the journey, is super important. You know, we were speaking before, Felice, about Theodoros Epitaris. I was really lucky that one of my teachers from Israel, Hadassah Sofat, told me you have to meet her when I was 22. My first time in New York, she hosted me in her apartment. I got to see all these incredible images and puppetry, and actually we re-met again last summer. I think she was just going to leave to work with Palestinians actually at the time. I'm wondering if she did it, but you know, like when I look at the fact that she does like a big piece of work every 2 years, I find that unbelievable. Me, I have a tendency of like either it's very quick or it takes 7 years. And I would like to give space for the process. I think the process itself is a creative mission. And I think, you know, it's for each, it's like it's an individual, it's like an own show in directing it. Like, what do I need to be able to speak about something, you know, that is so deep inside me, that has so much repercussions? What do I need? I need people believing in me. I need a space. I need, you know, you have to kind of, I mean, you don't have to do anything, but I greatly believe that you have to give yourself the safety that you need to speak, and the compassion like in yourselves, first of all, and to accept, like, you know, that there are different moments in it, and then to understand there is the doubts, There's like everything that is outside, all the fears, the doubts, the violence, we all have that also inside, in ourselves. And it's to build a dialogue with yourself and be able to say, oh, there's a voice of fear and there's a voice of silencing inside me. And so first of all, to see it and recognize it. I mean, fighting in general has not worked for me. I don't think it's been working for any of us and for the world. So I think we have to be able to hold complexity and an appreciation for, you know, it's like you kind of have to become your own supporter of saying, okay, I did this, and appreciate the little steps. We have to take it step by step. Thank you.
Salutiamo un attimo i ragazzi perché hanno il prossimo workshop. Grazie. Vediamo stasera. Ciao. Grazie. Grazie. Se vogliamo, se c'è qualcuno presente, sì, e vuole fare una domanda, puoi chiedere, certo. Se vuoi, sì, perché se no non... Sì, sì, va bene, benissimo.
Buongiorno a tutti. Si è parlato, mi chiamo Giuseppe Basma, studio la storia del teatro delle marionette, italiano, in particolare del 600-700, marionette barocche. Vorrei, ho visto che si è parlato con una certa intensità emotiva del rapporto di quello che vive il burattinaio nel rappresentare questioni delicate come quella della violenza, quindi rivivere il proprio vissuto sulla scena. Ho sentito alcuni interventi che parlano invece di come il pubblico, non il burattinaio, come il pubblico vive questa la visione di questa performance. Si è parlato di identificazione o di immedesimazione, due termini difficili da spiegare in inglese e capirne la differenza. Comunque a me interessa andare un po' più a fondo, cioè capire la relazione tra il burattinaio e il burattino. All'interno di questo, nello sviluppare questa performance, l'artista vive un momento particolare col suo burattinaio, si sviluppano cose nuove, che vive col suo burattinaio qualcosa di particolare e, secondo elemento, peccato, sono andati via gli studenti perché era anche rivolto a loro, sono un insegnante, quindi sono sempre sensibile agli studenti. E se si sviluppa, proprio perché emotivamente c'è un coinvolgimento particolare, forse un coinvolgimento particolare tra burattinaio e burattino, si sviluppa una tecnica anche particolare. Una tecnica di uso del burattino. Quindi so che sono domande difficili, a me bastano uno o due esempi, sono domande non difficili, mi scuso, domande complesse che richiedono tempo, ma mi basterebbe capire se sì, se no, e un esempio di qualcosa sarebbe sufficiente, perché utilizziamo la presenza dei burattinai qui per cercare di capire i loro segreti. Chiuderei qui e I would like to listen to Alice, possible, or the vote? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Grazie mille. Credo che la prima risposta sia allo spettacolo di Yael ieri sera. Adesso le diamo la parola verbalmente.
So, you know, I was saying I was very lucky to work with a lot of other artists supporting me for this creation, and one of them was Level Tranter. Actually, you know, in the show, it's language of Muppets and puppetry that talks of the relationship of the puppeteer and what it reveals about the story through this relationship. And I've never manipulated this kind of puppet before. I've done mask and object and lots of things. So first of all, I had seen the work of Neville and other people doing this kind of work, like the Paiva, like Taramieli. I've seen these shows for many years, so I knew the power of that. If you would have asked me 2 years ago if I would make a Muppet show, I would say never. You know? But then there came the need and the necessity, because I felt I could not tell this story without it. It enabled me, I think it enabled me to actually have humor and to show that complexity and through this personage also of Edith Piaf also to find love, because I was really trying to tell the story in other ways, but only when she appeared I could see how this was possible. And Neville, he kept saying to me while we were working, it's all technical. Of course, but you know what he means. And I think that's been a huge source of re-empowerment. There is something completely magical and insane about going back to a situation that you survived, where the power, the control on the most precious thing, your life, your body, is taken away from you brutally in 1 second. And then when you manage to come into it through art, you are taking this power back, and you're taking back the story and the narrative, and you are coming into it again. But now you are like, you're the superstar of it, you know, in a way, or, you know, like that you have exceptional powers, and we do have exceptional powers. And so I think it's really a way of saying also, never give up. Always find a way, always continue, and transforming, you know, when we manage to, yeah, that's my answer. Thank you so much. But it's like a feeling of victory for me performing here yesterday. Thank you for everyone for making this happen, for the festival, for believing in my work, and writing. The puppet always has the power.
Grazie. Ci sono altre domande in sala?
No more questions.
Alessandra,
It's not a question, actually.
una precisazione sulla parola burattinaio, burattino. Sappiamo che il linguaggio è molto fluido, è ambiguo, ci sono fraintendimenti, ma insomma, diciamo animatore o animatrice. L'umano rispetto non umano è l'umano.
Certo, no, è l'attore animatore che ha l'anima e chi non ha l'anima è l'oggetto senza anima.
Questo è da discutere.
Anche questo è da discutere, sarà giusto adesso che
non apriamo.
No.
Alessandra aveva forse anche una domanda, vero?
Alessandra, io?
No, forse era anche
No, io non ho domande.
No. Se non ci sono altre domande, no? Ci possiamo salutare, e prima di salutare ci sono le conclusioni di Cariad e di Cristina.
So, what an interesting morning, and thank you all for coming. When Cristina and I were talking about how we would conclude today, we decided that rather than sum up what we've heard, because you have all heard it, we would have a conversation. Cristina will talk in Italian, I will talk in English, and this is our way of concluding today. So we are two people coming out of the show. Cristina, I was struck by a lot of things and all of the things that we have heard, but one thing that has come up kind of repeatedly is the question of wounding, healing, care, some negativity, trauma, and all of the questions that go around that. So I just want to raise this question about autobiographical women's puppetry. Is it something to do with healing wounds? Is it something to do with caring for ourselves in some way? You know, care as a theme was never something that was talked about in theatre 20, 30 years ago. Now, care is a topic in theatre. We have to be inclusive, we have to make allowances, we have to address accessibility, we have to look after ourselves. So this was one of the themes that struck me about this kind of work, was about wounding and care.
Grazie Carlo. Sì, anche una delle parole chiave che ho notato, che avevo notato ricorrenti, erano appunto cura, guarigione, terapia non è stato detto, ma il senso era anche questo. Sicuramente è un tema importante e da quello che abbiamo ascoltato la figura viene in soccorso dell'umano. Io aggiungo una piccola considerazione. All'ultimo festival di Charles-de-Mézières, una cosa che avevo notato ricorrente in varie creazioni contemporanee era che avevo proprio l'impressione che gli artisti affidassero alle figure la cura di se stessi, cioè la figura si prendeva cura dell'umano. C'era in diversi spettacoli questa sorta di rovesciamento per cui diventa l'inumano, per quello dico con un punto interrogativo, quanto l'umano è, l'umano animato, la materia animata. E qui da quello che abbiamo sentito la figura ha un ruolo chiave nel passare attraverso un altro percorso che direttamente non sarebbe possibile. E qui c'è un altro dei termini chiave che è stato messo in evidenza fin dall'inizio da Yael, che è time, tempo. Prendere tempo e prendere distanza dal trauma, dalla ferita, ed evidentemente in un teatro d'attori questo non è scontato, forse impossibile, perché l'attore è quello che interpreta. Però questa distanza, questo tempo che ci si prende, è un tempo di cura, in senso lato, quanto ne avremmo bisogno oggi, di un tempo più dilatato, ma è proprio anche distanza che si traduce nella tecnica, no? Nella materialità. Cosa pensi, Claudia?
Cristina was also commenting on the aspect of time as a means of healing and giving ourselves time. But on that note, to sort of slightly move on to something else, I was really interested that both Yael and Magali talked about trilogies, about the making of 3 connected pieces of work. And Felice also talked about Teodoro Skipitare's doing creating different pieces which were relating to the priorities or the concerns or the interests or the objects at that time in her life. So I think in this autobiographical women's puppetry, there seems to be a huge emphasis on journey, time, different phases of life. And I think that can be seen also in the work of other women puppeteers, if we think about people like Ilke Schönbein, for example, and her birth spectacle, and the fact that autobiographical work is about a process of learning about ourselves, about expressing ourselves and our experiences, and about changing as well in some way. So I think that's very, very close to the personal, very close, and it's very intimate because we do different things throughout our lives, we change. And I hesitate before I say this, because all of our bodies change, but I will just say women are not fertile. Then they are mostly fertile. Then they are not fertile, if they live that long. And so there are, you know, the question of how our body changes and how our stories, internal and external change, are deeply related to time. Menstruation is deeply related to time. There are these kind of physical connections across time. So these are not opinions, these are just reflections and thoughts. And in relation to that, could we perhaps comment a little further on what Mary Boyd raised, that there is a lot of negativity in the stories, which I had not really thought of it like that. I didn't think, oh, that's a lot of negative stories. I thought these are stories which may be difficult to tell, or aspects of these stories which are difficult to tell. And somebody mentioned the Grimm's tales, and how when we were young, we thought they were nice stories, and then we knew they weren't, and we knew that they had been written as brutal, horrible stories. And one of the things I do, apart from puppetry, is I work a lot in healthcare contexts. And I'm just thinking that, again, maybe 30, 40 years ago, no one put illness on stage except as a joke. And now we have the cancer monologues, the HIV monologues, the vagina monologues. Clearly that's not an illness, but it's also something that people didn't talk about. And I was thinking about perhaps we need the sexual violence monologues, not to be negative, but because these are stories that need to be told. And in relation to that, pain is part of life. Sadness, grief, loss of power, loss of identity. These are part of life. So it's about the stories that need to be told in some way. And also in response to, I've forgotten her name, Elena's, I think, question about how do we make sure it doesn't turn into a gender fight. I just would like to put in the words listening. Listening. In the beginning, I was talking about truth and the difficulty of truth and the difficulty of filtering the stories we get and telling our own stories and honouring those own stories. And I think we need spaces for deep listening for these stories. And perhaps autobiographical puppetry, whether it's women or not, can create these deep listening spaces. I have a question about veiling. I was, again, really interested that all three artists used, at different points, masks, multiple masks, broken masks, object masks. And when you're thinking about autobiography as a way of expressing identity, masks, of course, we know that we have multiple identities. It's not a, one-way thing. But I just wanted to ask what you thought about the veiling and the masking.
Too many topics. Sì. molte parole chiave, concetti che avevo annotato.
Maybe just about the vein, because
Yeah,
we
but
moved between questions.
Rispetto alla malattia non posso non citare un profeta come Antonetto, che scriveva all'inizio del secolo scorso delle riflessioni sulla malattia e la peste, il contagio, interessanti, ma non è questa la sede. Ritornavo ancora su questa necessità l'ultima questione che poneva Cariad, di mascherare Heidi. Complesso, si potrebbe fare un convegno su questo processo, su questa tematica in relazione alle nostre figure, alle maschere. Da sempre nelle riflessioni anche teoriche sulle figure, sulle marionette, sulla maschera, questi oggetti, questi strumenti così potenti hanno questa doppia valenza, quella di nascondere e quello di rivelare. E anche in tanti altri casi, in tanti altri, relativamente ad altri temi, questa ambivalenza è sicuramente una delle potenzialità della marionetta. E forse si risponde anche alla questione del genere, del prendere posizione. La figura ha questa capacità straordinaria di dare insieme le cose, non ha bisogno di suddividere, di prendere posizione, di contrapporre, no? La copresenza a partire dall'animatore, l'animatrice e l'oggetto è sostanziale, costitutiva. Questo dà un'enorme potenzialità e quando noi parliamo di molteplicità di tutti gli interventi, molteplicità è anche la metamorfosi di cui dicevo poco fa, ci danno l'esempio appunto di come la figura incarni così per essenza, per sua natura, questa possibilità molteplice. Legata a questa possibilità molteplice è anche l'altro tema che abbiamo anticipato anche nel corso delle presentazioni, che è quello della relazione fortissima uscita da tutti gli interventi tra individuale e universale, tra l'intimo e il politico. In una toilette qui qualcuno ha scritto sulla porta l'intimo e politico, bellissimo. Personale politico, è stato uno slogan degli anni 70. Anche qui possiamo ricorrere a riflessioni storiche, teoriche, ma attualissime. Uno dei miei poeti preferiti è Ricche, i poeti parlano sempre di più rispetto al linguaggio ordinario, quotidiano. Ricche vedeva nella marionetta proprio questa potenzialità di parlare l'universale, si vede da lontano, nel senso che è visibile a tutti, a tutte, no? Quindi questa realizzazione, utopia, a seconda dei punti di vista, dell'ideale di comunità, di teatro d'altre epoche, da altri tempi. E questa mi è piaciuto molto come nei diversi interventi, e soprattutto insomma, dalla voce delle artiste, questo processo abbia quasi due posizioni, due percorsi opposti ma simmetrici, proprio perché, come si diceva nella discussione, hanno al cuore, al nucleo lo stesso obiettivo, cioè rivelare l'intimità, l'interiorità o un lavoro su se stessi che però sia utile e che guarisca anche una comunità. E appunto nei due casi diversi dalla necessità di parlare, di dare voce. Qui ci sarebbe anche il tema del canto e della musica come mezzo privilegiato per esprimere questi temi, non chiudo la parentesi. Dare voce, esprimere, quasi gridare questo, portare all'evidenza, portare alla luce, e dall'altra parte invece Magali che ritiene necessario invece velare, come dicevi, nascondere, e per la quale, come dicevo prima, l'intimità, la dimensione politica si raggiunge attraverso il silenzio e la ricerca della propria interiorità, intimità. Messo insieme le cose.
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting, and I think it's particularly pertinent for puppets. Christina was asking me about the relationship between the personal and the universal, or the individual and the universal. And I think that's in some way will so often come up for puppetry, because the puppet, although it's always going to be some kind of projection of ourselves, it's always going to be something connected to us, but it's also always going to be something that is not us as well. So it straddles this divide. And I guess also because the puppet is not ourselves, it can be seen and read in different ways by the audience, the participants, let's call them, in some way. But I related, in some way, when I was listening to the 3 presentations, I was also thinking and wondering whether puppetry can ever not be autobiographical in some way, because we cannot make art without putting something of ourselves into it. And I know that as a creator myself, and I know that as an audience myself, I will always read my story in whatever I see. So, or I will always read something of my story in whatever I see. So I suppose the way in which you put it, Christina, that sometimes we have stories that must be told, and we have to get them out there because we have to make those voices and those experiences heard. And that is something which may or may not touch the lives of others. And I was listening to Yael in a conversation earlier saying it's hard to sell shows about sexual violence. And Yael actually said that theatres say to her, this isn't a material for our audience. And, that in itself is quite a statement. Our audiences don't want to hear about this thing that happens to
1 out of 5, 1 out of 4, 1 out of 3, or it depends how you want to do it.
So many women. So that's one side, but the other side, in relation to Magali's work and in the work of many people, and I would cite not only women, but also puppeteers such as Philippe Gentil, who created dream-like environment, the work of Elise Vigneron, for example, working with a personal process, personal dreams, personal imagery, which may be surreal, fragmented, disjointed, and putting it together, and sometimes making it so dreamlike and metaphorical, and hoping that the audience will find something universal is a risk. It's a risk also in performance. So I don't think I'm answering your question at all, but I think that both when we work from consciously told stories and perhaps metaphorical, subconscious elements, we are seeking a way for our own personal experience to find some connection with the universal. But one thing I would say about that, and it's certainly the case with Yael's work, I believe it's also the case with Magali's work, and I know it's the case with Theodora's work, is that a long time ago, I was thinking about this very theme about the individual versus the universal. When you're making a piece of theatre about past trauma, or when you're making a piece of theatre about, let's say, war or something else like that, it tends to be much more powerful. I read this and I believe it. It tends to be much more powerful when the original story, whether it's told as a real life story or not, when that story is real, when that story is true on the deepest level. So if I make a piece about, let's just say, experiences in war, and I make it very general without reference to any particular personal or human experience, it becomes it may become a little vague. But if I make a piece that is based on specific circumstances, even if I don't name those specific circumstances, there will be an authenticity in it. So maybe that's the word that I come to, is authenticity of experience on stage. I don't believe we have a lot of time left, but there is one thing I would just like to add for 2 minutes, which is the prevalence of puppets, because we are, you know, and this question about what kind of puppets and so on. And knowing that Yael was doing work with Neville Tranter with this kind of puppet that is always in direct relationship, and I've seen a lot of work by Neville Tranter which works in this way, and it's fascinating, is about the question of the body of the performer and puppets that emerge from the body of the performer and are clearly connected to the body of the performer. All puppets are connected to the body of the performer, but in many shows they are presented as separate beings. But in the kind of work that we've been talking about, the body of the performer is part of the body of the puppet. And I think that's really, really interesting in women's theatre, in autobiographical work, and all these themes that we're touching on.
Grazie Casia. Abbiamo esaurito il tempo, ma replico con solo qualche parola lasciata così. Correva in una delle citazioni che avevo mostrato all'inizio di Annie Albers, la materia come metafora, credo sia un'espressione chiave per la potenzialità della marionetta rispetto a quello che abbiamo detto, e rispetto all'autenticità, la marionetta non mente, la figura non mente, non ha l'autenticità della finzione, dell'attore in carne ed ossa. Però, e su questo chiudo, pongo anche la questione dell'identità. Noi abbiamo un po' il mito dell'integrità, del tutto, dell'intero, dell'integro. E in realtà siamo scissimi, tutte queste storie ce lo raccontano, e la marionetta esprime questa duplicità, questa molteplicità, questa scissione, dunque anche forse l'accettazione di una frammentazione, di una scissione, di una lacerazione che è interna e a cui la figura dà forma, dà materia. Io ringrazio tutte, sì, Roberta.
Sì, ringraziamo, veramente grazie per essere stati con noi. Thank you very much all the people that were in presence and all the people that were connected on Zoom. When we spoke about this topic, we just know that it was only a point from to start, because we realized immediately how much is this work. So we hope that this topic will take from some other festival, international puppet festival around the world, because we think that it's a really, really interesting subject. So thank you very much. I will tell to all the people that are on Zoom that we send the new link Zoom for the 2 appointments that we have in the afternoon. There is a podcast about Cantastorie and the Global Heroes, and the new books by Giuseppina Colpicelli that speaks about her mom, Maria Signorelli. Thank you again, and okay.
Roberta?
Sta chiamando?
Roberta, sono Alessandra.
Ale.
Posso dire una cosa?
Sì, Ale, vai.
Io non so in sala chi sia il pubblico, ma posso dire che è bellissimo vedere una tavola fatta di sole donne, e tutte le persone che sono connesse, a parte il segretario generale di Univa Internazionale Dimitri Jagenot, sono tutte donne.
Yes, it's true.
Ciao, per la prossima.
Ci lasciamo così, Ale. Un bacio, un abbraccio.
Ciao.
Grazie a tutti.
Qui ne abbiamo, qui siamo a buona metà e metà, dai.
Ok, ottimo. Ciao, grazie.
Grazie a tutti, ciao.
Grazie, ciao.
Merci, au revoir, bonne fin de journée.